File this one under the category of how in the world did that ever get published? A new report from Medical News Today, basically an online blog post, under the heading of Honest Nutrition, is titled How Bad Are Carbs Really? Which is a pretty reasonable title. But there's a statement in here right off the bat that says carbohydrates are essential nutrients for the body to function properly. Essential nutrients, carbohydrates. Somehow this was written by an RDN and fact-checked by a PhD. Let's talk about this and see if it's really true. I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director at dietdoctor.com, and this is a small publication, post kind of thing. It's not a peer-reviewed journal, but I still had to bring this up because I'm involved in the evidence basing at dietdoctor.com, myself along with Dr. Michael Tamber and our medical review team, and it's something we take very seriously. So when I saw this, having been fact-checked and being published, it just kind of blew my mind. So let me say this phrase again. Carbohydrates are essential nutrients for the body to function properly as they serve as a primary source of energy. Now, the citation, amazingly, is an article written by Amber O'Hearn about carnivore diets. And that's how I first learned about this. I saw her tweet about it, and I had to sort of dig into it because it's so interesting. I mean, it couldn't be more backwards. They used a citation that says nothing about carbohydrates being essential nutrition. In fact, the point is how carbohydrates are not essential nutrition. And it is very clear, carbohydrates are not essential nutrition, period. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. That's really not a debatable fact. Now, our body needs glucose. Sometimes that gets confused, but that's clearly not what they're saying. Our body needs glucose, but it doesn't need to get glucose from the food you eat. It can make its own glucose. So there's no such thing as necessary carbohydrates. People have lived long times with zero carbohydrate diets. Now, whether or not carbohydrates are needed for optimal health or for improving health or for athletic performance, maximal athletic performance, that's very different than saying, are they essential for survival? We have essential amino acids that we have to eat and get in our diet that are essential for survival. We have essential fatty acids that we have to get from our diet that are essential for survival. That's what that term essential means, that we need them for survival and we can't make them on our own. Carbohydrates, no such thing. So, I don't know, I guess I could just rant and rave about how I don't understand how a statement like this can get published because it is so misleading. But the concept of this article makes a lot of sense. Are carbs good or are carbs bad? And why do we get into this good and bad fight? Why does it always have to be black and white? Because it isn't. Food is not black and white like that. Carbs, like anything, whether you want to say are they good or are they bad, it depends what carbs are you talking about, how much are you talking about it, when do you eat them, how much of them do you eat, and what other foods do you eat? What is your other dietary components, and who are you? What is your baseline medical, base that you're starting from? All of those things play into are carbs right or wrong for you. There is no blanket statement carbs are good or bad. So for the rest of this article, it starts to improve. I mean, they talk about the different types of carbohydrates, simple and complex, and they're very clear that you want to try and avoid simple carbohydrates, which makes a lot of sense. Refined sugars, refined carbs, that makes a lot of sense. But then they go on to say that there are healthy carbs like fruits, bananas, apples, and berries, whole grains such as flour, rice, and quinoa, peas and beans, and dairy products like low-fat milk, yogurt, and cheese, that these are by default healthy carbs. Well, just as you can say good or bad, I've got a problem saying these are by default healthy carbs. Now, in observational studies, people who eat more of these tend to be healthier, but that does not prove they cause the health. That just usually shows healthy people are making choices about what they are told are healthy. But it's clear they can be part of a healthy diet, and that's very different than saying they are intrinsically healthy, to say that they can be part of a healthy diet. And complex carbohydrates tend to have fiber, they tend to have some phytonutrients and minerals, and those are all important. Doesn't mean you have to get them from whole grains or from certain carbohydrates. You can get them from lots of different places. Above ground vegetables will likely provide all you need. But the point is, complex carbohydrates, natural occurring carbohydrates like vegetables, even some whole grains do have some beneficial properties. Just beware that you can get them from different parts. And that's why we have a whole guide on you need to eat fruits and vegetables, and we'll link to that below because I think that's important to take a look at. Or a whole guide on whole grains to really go through the details of are whole grains good or bad, and in what certain circumstances may you want to include them or want to avoid them. Because again, there's no blanket statement good or bad. It has to do with specifics about how much, how often, what else you eat them with, and who are you? What is your baseline metabolic status? So they make another comment in this article. Despite the popularity of low carbohydrate diets, they're not suitable for everyone, and some populations still benefit from a carbohydrate-rich diet. Totally true. Low carbohydrate diets may not be suitable for everyone, and certainly high carbohydrates are not suitable for everyone. So this needs to be recognized as well. Then they go on to say a carbohydrate restriction of 45% or less of daily calories is more effective for short-term blood sugar control, but it may be unsustainable and does not provide greater long-term results than a range of 50 to 55% of daily calories from carbohydrates. Maybe unsustainable? I mean, any randomized controlled trial looking at dietary interventions shows low compliance, but that doesn't prove it's unsustainable. And we have plenty of evidence showing that low-carb diets, not just 45%, but down to 20 grams, 30 grams per day, is perfectly sustainable for people who choose to do it. And those are the people who are likely going to see the most benefit from weight loss and metabolic benefit. So if it's right for you, if it works for you and you choose to do it, it absolutely is sustainable. But let's get back to this 45% or less of daily calories, defining that as low carb once again. I mean, I've sort of railed against this, and we wrote a post before how low carb is low carb. Well, don't ask Harvard, because the Harvard School of Public Health has been publishing nutritional epidemiology studies looking at 40% of calories as carbohydrates and labeling that as low carb. Let's be very clear. Liberal low carb is less than 100 grams per day. Moderate low carb is less than 50 grams per day. Strict low carb is less than 20 grams of net carbs, 30 grams of total carbs per day. That is nowhere near this 45%. So we're talking about completely different things. The old apples and oranges, bad analogy. But we're talking about completely different things. If we want to focus on low carb, we should truly focus on low carb, which should be, in my mind and at Diet Doctor, the way we describe it, less than 100 grams of net carbs per day. Right? If we're talking about 45% or 40% of your calories, that's just usually a high carb, high fat, high calorie diet that we want to avoid anyway. So that's a really important point. And also an important point that I posted about on sort of my video rebuttal to this PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the vegan advocacy group, where they published a review of keto diets, but yet pulled in all this evidence from studies that looked at 40% of your calories from carbohydrates, which is nowhere near a keto diet, and looking at nutritional epidemiology studies that had really no place in a review of keto diet. So it was incredibly misleading. And again, we'll link to that down below because I think it's important for people to see. But let's wrap this up and get to the bottom line. Okay, one, all right, fact checking, evidence basing, it's hard. You have to look through your references. You have to look through every statement. You have to look through every publication with a fine-tooth comb to make sure what you're saying is absolutely defensible and absolutely true, and that you're linking to the proper study. All right, this report failed on that, but that's okay. I mean, we can still try and get something out of it. Carbs are not good or bad. It's what kind of carbs, how much, how often, and who are you. If you have metabolic dysfunction, if you have insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, the old saying is you probably didn't get there with carrots and sweet potato, but eliminating carbs can still be helpful, right? Even if carrots and sweet potato weren't the initial problem, getting rid of the majority of your carbs, including carrots and sweet potato, can still be a very good solution. The solution isn't always the same thing as the problem, right? It was likely overeating calories, refined carbohydrates, maybe even a combined high carb, high fat, ultra processed food diet. You know, that if that's the problem, the solution can still be eliminating most carbohydrates except for above ground vegetables. That's absolutely one of the solutions, not the only solution, right? So it's much more complex than just good or bad carbohydrates. And that's why we also have a whole guide on carbohydrates, which again, we'll link to below. Because, you know, we can't always get to the details that are really beneficial for you as an individual just by saying good or bad, right? And that's a whole point. I guess I probably said that 10 times, so I'm sorry for getting sick of hearing me say that, but I think it's so important to emphasize that. So please check some of the links below because they really are going to explain more about this important topic. And again, I hope this was helpful. Please click the thumbs up and subscribe button if you thought it was, and you'll get updates from us here on a regular basis on Diet Doctor News on YouTube. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.